So we're still working with Barbara Brown Taylor's book, An Altar in the World. This week's chapter 7, which is, no, it's not called It's No Accident. It's called The Practice of Living with Purpose. The practice of living with purpose. And so the It's No Accident came to me because I'm thinking, it's really no accident that we all have a particular purpose. So we're going to explore that, see what that's all about and how it works for each and every one of us, you know, this individualized expression of the divine. And as I was thinking about purpose, thinking about that question that is asked so frequently, what do you do? What do you do? And what do you answer to that question? If someone says, what do you do? What do you usually tell them? Yeah, what your job is. And I was going through a time when I was back years ago. It's interesting that I'm having this talk this week, and my dad's in town because he was working with me on this challenge I had. Because people would ask me, what do you do? And I was complaining at the time that no one wanted to talk to me about anything but doing the weather. And he introduced me to a life coach friend of his, a woman named Carolyn from, I think, Seattle or someplace. And she was working with me on that. So she says to me, what do you do? And I said, well, I do the weather for Channel 2. Oh, I see. Ask me what I do. I said, okay, Carolyn, what do you do? Well, I wake up in the morning and I figure out what I'm going to do that day, and I do anything I want to do. Sometimes I go for a hike, and sometimes I eat breakfast, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes I go to the gym. And I was like, you really could answer that question with something different than your job? What? Right? But generally, it's the job. So I was thinking about this whole idea about jobs and what you do, and I've done a lot of things. What are some of the things that you have been in the workplace over the years? Just throw it out there. What have you done? What are some of your jobs? Crazy ones, fun ones you never want to do again. Don't be bashful. Come on. No, we're all amongst friends. Telemarketer, babysitter, house cleaner, newspaper boy, clean. Whoa, okay, time to stop. Time to stop. Cleaning, I'm not even, oh my goodness. Well, she's a scientist here, of course. She cuts things open and cleans them out. I mean, that's what the scientists do. My goodness. There was a moment last night when I was thinking I should take out the call and response part of the service. Thinking about jobs, though, I went to my favorite source for all information that's necessary for the world to know, Google, and it just so works, the top jobs, because as Americans, we love to shop, and eventually we love to buy. And then after we shop and buy, then we want to eat. And then after we eat, we go home and we start working on a computer and print out bunches of stuff. I don't know how they ever thought the computer was going to be less paper. It's more paper. We do paperwork. And then after that, we got to figure out some kind of way to deal with all that. So we run to the doctor. But since we really can't afford the doctor because of health insurance, we just run to Google, who's our doctor, and tells us what we got. And then we totally freak out because our arm's going to fall off because it's gangrene and it's really just a pinprick, you know. So I was thinking about all that, and it just made so much sense when I looked at the top 10 jobs in America. The top 10 jobs in America. Number 1, retail sales. Of course, because we love to shop. Number 2, cashier, because then once we shop, we got to buy. Number 3, food preparation, because we're hungry. We got to go eat. Yes. And when you go to eat today, make sure you go to the Junkyard Cafe, brought to you by... Or our second favorite place, Maria's. You guys like Maria's, don't you? Devlin's like, hey, there's no other restaurant but the Junkyard Cafe. Then the number 4 is the office. Number 5 is the nurse. Because, you get sick, you go to the nurse. You don't get to see the doctor. If you do, it's only for 10 minutes. Better to see the nurse. Waiter, customer service, freight, because we have so much stuff. Freight is number 8 on the list. 9 for the secretary, and 10, because we have so much stuff, is the janitor. Interesting. I thought that so fits with the American psyche of what we do, And then it's all of this of what we're working with and what are we doing, and these kind of jobs. It's a journey. It's a struggle to find your purpose. Is your purpose really to pick up stuff? Is your purpose just to sell stuff? Is your purpose just to serve people, to be in customer service and on the phone, telemarketing and all that kind of stuff? I don't know. So I went to another source of good information, Martin Luther, the theologian and the priest, and he had this to say about all this. He says, whatever our job in the world happens to be, Our mutual vocation is to love God and neighbor. That really boils it down really nicely. It's an interesting idea. Okay, so love God and your neighbor. But we can't all work for Hallmark. Writing cards say, I love you, and the people can buy, you know? So we have to look for purpose and meaning in what it is that we already do. And we all want to live a meaningful life. No one wants to live a meaningless life. We want to experience something that's bigger than ourselves. I think that's what drives us to the spiritual journeys that we're all on. There's something about life, and we know it's bigger than just the individual experience that we're having. How do we tap into that bigger life? Martin Luther gives us a tip. Love God, love your neighbor. And since we know in the science mind that there's only one life, and that life is the life of everyone, individualized, that it's not diminished by the multiplicity of expression that life brings to us, then we absolutely know that every moment of every day we have the opportunity to love God as our neighbor and to love our neighbor as spirit. Now, Ernest Holmes, our philosopher and founder of our teaching, says that, and please, I'm using his language from 1938, so translate this for yourself. Every man is the dreamer of his own dreams, and within each is the spiritual power to choose the patterns that he wishes to experience in his life. And this is the powerful part of that. Within each is the spiritual power, within each of us is the spiritual power to choose. We are at choice as to what patterns we experience in our lives. We are at choice, therefore, at finding what is our meaning and our purpose. But many of us feel like our jobs don't bring us any purpose. In fact, that guy Larry Dorsey, who does a lot of work, the doctor who does a lot of work on healing, the power of healing through the power of prayer, has done some research around this, and I was surprised to discover that Monday morning, between 8 and 9 a.m., more heart attacks happen than any other time of the week. Wow. For all people. For all people. That's an interesting idea. There's a lot of folks that are working. It's tomorrow. That's tomorrow morning. So everybody, wake up by 7. Meditate from 7:15 to 7:30. Then chill out, take a shower, take a bath, and no coffee. Write a gratitude list, right? Call your practitioner at 8 o'clock. Talk to them for an hour. You will make it. You'll be out the door by 10. You might be a little late for work, but you'll be alive. Gosh, you guys are so serious. Yeah. But you know, seriously speaking, though, it's a crazy thought that you looked at all those top 10 jobs. You look at how many of us go to work, and how many of you in here, don't raise your hands because I don't want to know. I want you to just think about it. Are you going to a job that you really don't enjoy, and are you feeling like, oh, I gotta go to work again? We'll talk about this for the rest of this 20 minutes or 15 minutes or so that's left. Because see, Barbara Brown Taylor says that people can know when their gifts are being wasted. We know. That urge in you that goes like, oh, gotta go to this office again. It eats away. The knowledge of that eats away at the soul like a cancer. Right? But trust me, folks, it's not the job. It's not the job. In those top 10 jobs, they're not bringing folks cancer. They're not causing the heart attack. It's back to what Dr. Holmes talks about. We have the choice to choose the pattern of our experience in life. Back to what Luther talked about, what Martin Luther talked about. Love God and your neighbor. When we're going to work, we have an opportunity, no matter what the job is, to set and experience the pattern for ourselves. I think about my friend John, who I talked about a couple weeks ago, that works at the Ralph store, who every time I walk in there, how's your brother? How's Michael doing? Has he got a new play yet? He stacks his fruit and vegetables in the produce section like a spiritual master. He's got an energy about him. It's like being with a little mini Buddha when you're hanging out with him. He's just so calm and cool. And his boss, the manager of that store, Daryl, he's the manager, but he loves to run the register. And why? Because he loves to drop these little pearls of wisdom on you when he's in there. He loves to just share what just what's on his heart, and you feel a sense of peace. And he's pushing those buttons on the register, but he knows that it's each and every individual person that's walking through that door that's important, that he's talking to a child of God every time. Every person that you're working with, that's what's happening in your life, you see. And our book that we're talking about this month, The Altar in the World, Barbara Brown Taylor was struggling with this idea of purpose, this idea of vocation, this idea of meaning in life. And she said in her journey that she was, I thought that God had a purpose for me, and my main job was to discover what that purpose was. And she tells the story in the book of how she was going to seminary, and all the other students at seminary, they just knew they were going to have a church, or they knew what their mission, they knew what their purpose was. She didn't know what her purpose was. She said, I didn't even belong to a church. I just like going to the seminary to learn stuff. And so she was just there learning, wondering what her purpose was, and she would go after service, the story she tells, she would go after class and pray, and she wanted to find a place where she could pray just to herself. And she found this fire escape. And she talks about how she would climb up this old fire escape with this crusty paint, and she was kind of scared of heights, so she would grab one rail to the next like a trapeze artist, grab real quick so she couldn't fall, and the paint would crackle under her nails, and she would just pray every day. And the story she tells is so beautiful. She says she prayed until her prayers were no longer words, until her prayers were like a wolf howling at the moon. In other words, she prayed until she was learning to pray from her heart and from her soul, from something deep within was talking to her. And it was at that moment that she heard the voice that said, your purpose? It's anything that pleases you. She's like, what? Anything that pleases you. She was kind of disappointed because she wanted to have a purpose. But then she was excited because it realized what Dr. Holmes was talking about. We choose the pattern of our experience. We choose what it is that's going to be our purpose. We're the one that finds the purpose. That's how John, he knows his purpose. And yeah, so he's stacking fruit, but that's not his purpose. His purpose is to engage with every person as if they are a child of God, and to be one-to-one with that person and see into their eyes and speak to their heart and to their soul. And he does that in such a way that he remembers little things. He met my brother one time, remembers his name and his profession, And it's not just me that he does that to. I hear him do that to just about everybody that walks into that store that's a regular in that store. See, we supply our purpose. It says here in our chalk, it says, you are free. You are free to do quite a lot of things for a living, but they're not all going to come with their own evident purposes. The person who changes the street lights on the corner, on the traffic signal, he may not realize that what he's doing by changing those lights and making sure they always work is protecting us to make sure that we're safe as we do our travels. The person who fills the pothole in the street may not realize that that pothole that he's filled is going to save a person's life who's carrying their child in their car when they hit that pothole, so they don't hit that pothole so their tire doesn't blow out or something like that. You see? The person that calibrates the pumps at your gas station, they may not realize, without this understanding that we're talking about today, they may not realize that calibrating that pump can be the difference in a person stranded in the middle of the night because their car ran out of gas because they didn't get the right amount of gas in their car and their gauge didn't work. These little things that people are doing are saving people's lives, are making lives better for each and every one of us. The janitor at the school, if he's not there, he's not realizing it. Those kindergarten kids are set for the next day because he's put everything in place for them to have a learning opportunity. You see, every job has its purpose that is loving God and their neighbor, but we must supply that purpose. And one way we can do it is when we apply kindness in our life instead of meanness in our life. We can just stop and say hello to the person who looks like the other for just a moment. When we can see the divine in every single person that we meet. We can see the divine in every single person that we meet. We're adding purpose to our life. We can recognize that we're no more important than anybody else, that we all have a special importance because we're all one in this experience called life. As Barbara Brown Taylor says it, when we just stop being a jerk But even then, she says, this is her, I put this as a quote, yet even this, her talking about this, turned out to be helpful, since recognizing my jerkdom is how I remember that this is not who I want to be. Right? So every moment is an opportunity to journey into more purpose in our life. There's no reason to shame ourselves because we were a jerk. You go, oh gosh, I was a jerk. Wow, I don't want to be like that. And now that memory gets into your brain. A friend of mine, we're driving along, and he says, get out of my way, you. And he says, and I know because I'm a sometimes. You know, he gets it. He says he gets it. And as he said that second part, the person actually changed lanes. If he had not said the second part, they probably would have just slowed down and been creeping along in front of him, and he'd still be banging on the steering wheel. But because he had that self-awareness to know he's no more important than anybody else, he was able to move through that experience and say, that's not who I want to be. That's not how I want to be. You see. So again, our real job is to love God and our neighbor. And another thing I want to talk about here is it may not be the job that pays your money. It may not be the job that pays your money. It may not be what makes your heart sing, what brings music to your soul. It might not come with a paycheck. You see, our true purpose is to become more fully human. And not the kind of fully human, I love when she talks about this in this chapter, it's a great concept. Not the kind of fully human where you do something jerky and you go, well, I'm only human. No, not that throwaway excuse. I'm only human, what do you expect? No. We're talking about the kindness, we're talking about the love, we're talking about being grateful for life, being gentler to people's weaknesses so that we can lift them up in the state of those weaknesses, to practice forgivingness and compassionate behavior toward another. And that doesn't necessarily going to pay you any money. And if you're trying to find your purpose sometimes when you're paying your money, it might backfire on you. She talks about this. She says, when the music you love to play becomes the music you have to play to pay your rent, your heart can suffer from alienation of affection. Sometimes it's the soccer coach who has been slinging trash cans all day. That's where his meaning comes, from being the soccer coach, you know. Sometimes it's that there's a chapter, a part of the chapter where she's in an interfaith group, and the different ministers are talking about their challenges of ministry, and this one minister, Presbyterian minister, says, "Gosh, I now know why I'm so tired. All I do is ministry, but you, the priest, you're a clown, and you go to hospitals as a clown. And Barbara, you write books, and this other one, you play the guitar, and you go at senior centers. They have something else that brings more joy to your life. So if you're in one of those situations where you're waking up on a Monday morning, and you're like, waking up at 10 because you don't want to wake up between 8 and 9, and you're like, oh God, I go to work. Maybe it's the go to work so you can take the music lessons to learn to play the guitar so you can go work at the senior center volunteering. There's something that's going to bring you that affection, it's going to bring you that joy, that'll put more meaning into your life so you can be kinder to those that are weaker than ours, or experiencing things that we know can be lifted up by just being a little more loving in our life. So no matter what happens in your life, whether you go to work and you do the love of God just because it's the work that you do, or you go to work so you can get something else later to do the love of God, it's not an accident. Your life is here for a purpose, on purpose. You're here to do something good. Not just be good, but do something good. And so it is. So that's where this comes from. Are we ready now? Here we go. I am not only good, I am good for something, for Spirit has incarnated as me for a truly divine purpose. Sweet. All right. Thank you, my beloved. So this is when we get to do prayer, and we speak the word of truth for those in our lives. In fact, we get to practice what we just talked about, that life of living on purpose, right? So if there's someone in your heart, on your heart, that needs to have the truth more fully revealed in their life. We speak that word for that person right now. If it's your own life, maybe it's just so great you only want to express gratitude. That's a perfect prayer too, right? Meister Eckhart, if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, you have prayed enough. So in this moment, I open up the floor, I open up the room, we're going to pray. I'll pray as the voice for all of us, but let's put that idea, that truth, into the room, into a vibrational form that the law of mind will then put into action. And I open it up right now. Who do we have? T. Michael. Patricia. Ron. Ralph. Feeling, sensing, and knowing the divine life that is God, that is animating as each and every one of us, that is bringing this experience of livingness through its self-givingness. I recognize that we are all one in the mind of God, one in the life that is God, one in the experience of joy and harmony, uplift, and support. So we speak this word of truth for all those that have been brought to the room in voice and vibration, but also all those that are brought into the room in conscious thought. And even those that don't know that we know that they know that we know, we bring that into this prayer as well. For Spirit has this infinite knowledge and infinite wisdom combined with infinite supply and power that outpictures and unfolds as right action, as divine healing, as perfect employment, as recognition of purpose and value, bringing that something that brings that something to a person's life fully into view. We stand on the vista of high consciousness and we look from the upper room into the reality of human experience, knowing that we are not spiritual beings having a human experience. We are spiritual beings having an experience of life itself. So it is in this space of joy and recognition of the power and the presence that lives as us, in us, through us, for us, and with us, that I gratefully release this prayer into the law of mind, knowing it is done, complete, and fulfilled by this word, and so it is.